Hello, everyone, and welcome to this online spiritual gathering of SSUC on this last Sunday in August. Thank you for choosing to take time to be with us today. Time to find a quiet place in your home, a quiet place in your heart, a place to be opened to deeper living as we receive the gifts of music, wisdom of readings, the images of photography that speak to us, and a time for reflection. Wherever you are today, we welcome you. And from whatever geography and from whatever weather you're experiencing, within and without, you have an important presence in this online community, whatever the weather is in your heart today. Whether it's mainly sunny or it's overcast with a few sunny periods, or it's intermittent with showers of grief, sadness, or whether you're socked in by fog. We are grateful, and it's important that we have this time to be with one another. We're continuing to explore our summer series, Windows to Wonder, Pondering Everyday Sacraments, and today we ponder the sacramental quality of the experience of fog. Joining me in welcoming you today is my teammate Christopher New, and Deb on piano, Pam, Janice, and Jeff leading us in song, Noah and Joseph helping us with all things technical, and Dawn holding a space for each of you and helping to monitor the live stream on Facebook. As we join one another in the ways that we can be present to each other, I invite us to take a moment to consider where we're placed, to honor the legacy of the land on which you find yourself, acknowledging its story, its first peoples, the names by which it has been known. Those of us who find ourselves in the SSUC community in Edmonton or Saskatoon honor the ancient land of Cree and Métis people with whom we're partners in Treaty 6 territory. As we honor where we're placed and we honor this time together, we do what we do each time we gather, and we invite you to light a candle where you are as we light a candle in this space. A candle to burn in this time we share with one another. As we welcome the light of a new day, the light of our ancestors, the light of the generations coming after us, the light of the everyday ordinary, which gifts us with yet another day none of us have ever seen before. We welcome the light, and we invite it to shine through us.
Shine through us, light of love, on all creation.
Hello, everyone. I want to share with you a story today in our Time for All Ages. It is about the fog. It's about that element of the fog that we use as a way to talk about our feelings and our emotions. Sometimes we say we're in a fog or that there is a fog hanging over us. And this is a really important emotion and a really important and challenging thing to deal with for us when talking about fog means that we're feeling a certain way, feeling sad, feeling depressed. And so this story talks about that aspect of fog, and I want to encourage everyone listening that if this is a challenge for you, hopefully you have someone close at hand, someone you are watching with, or someone you can chat with online throughout this gathering, if you need to do that. So on to the story. The Princess and the Fog by Lloyd Jones. A story for children and all people with depression. Once upon a time, there was a princess. She loved to read. She loved to play outside with her friends. She loved school. She loved to ride her horses. She loved her loyal subjects. She loved her mom and dad, the king and queen. She was loved by all in turn, for she was smart, beautiful, brave, honest, and kind. She had everything a little girl could ever want, and she was happy. That is, until the fog came. As time went on, it got worse and worse. The clouds kept gathering and growing. Eventually, her whole head was surrounded by a dense, dark fog that she could hardly see out of anymore. But still, nobody noticed. She started to feel completely alone, even when she wasn't. The fog made the princess feel slow, sad, and tired. She had trouble concentrating on or doing even the simplest of things. Suddenly, everything seemed really difficult. All the things she used to love to do, she suddenly didn't feel like doing anymore. So she just stopped doing them. Finally, the king and queen began to see the fog. They wanted to help the princess, but didn't know how. They tried to get rid of the fog, but it wouldn't go away. The king and queen just wanted the princess to be happy, but nothing could stop her from feeling sad. They didn't know what to do, but they kept trying. One day, a friend from school came to the castle to ask the princess if she wanted to go out and play. "Sarah just got a new basketball. You want to play?" No. The princess didn't feel like playing. She didn't feel like doing anything. The next day, her friend came to the castle again to ask the princess if she wanted to read comics together. "The new issue of Squid Boy and Clam Lad came out today." No. The princess didn't feel like reading comics. She didn't feel like doing anything. The day after that, her friend came back again to ask the princess if she wanted to watch some TV together. "There's a really good episode of..." No. The princess didn't feel like watching TV. So her friend asked the princess if she wanted to talk. At first, the princess wasn't sure. She found it difficult and didn't know what to say. But little by little, she began to talk. The princess found that the more she talked about the fog, the better she felt. So they talked and talked and talked. They talked all day, but she still had more to say. She talked to her other friends, and she talked to her parents. She talked to her teacher and anyone else who would listen. Some just listened, but some had similar things to say. Some of them even had ideas of ways they could help. Her teacher told her to go and see the adventurers, who took her exploring in the fresh air and sunshine. They also helped her set daily challenges for herself. Completing a challenge every day helped her to feel healthier and happier. The king and queen took her to see the castle druid. They talked about the fog, and he brewed up some potions for her to try. Her friends told her about the 1,000-year-old wise woman. She told her that fog like this had been seen in the kingdom before. It often followed people who felt sad or lonely or had been treated badly. But sometimes it came for no obvious reason at all. It isn't easy to make the fog go away. But it helps to talk about it and do the things that make you feel happy. The princess had no idea where there were so many people in her life who would be willing to help her, or even just to listen to her when she needed to talk. Suddenly, she didn't feel so alone anymore. With all the help and support of the people of the kingdom, the fog started to disappear, bit by bit, just as gradually as it had come. Things started to go back to normal after that. Everyone was happy to see the princess back to her old self again, but that's not the end of the story. Every now and then, the dark clouds would start to come back. But when they did, she knew where to turn.
When we see the wonder of a sunset, hear sweet music in the air, feel the power of a thunderstorm, sense connection everywhere. It's the wonder of life that we celebrate in awe and gratitude. The miracle of life that amazes us and leaves us humbled and moved. When we see the majesty of mountains, hear the robin's tuneful song,
I want to share another story with you this morning. A story written by Barbara Brown Taylor in her book, Home by Another Way. It's a story that was included in a sermon she preached entitled Thin Places. And it speaks of her and her husband's experience of traveling in Ireland to Croagh Patrick, the mountain of St. Patrick in Mayo County, Ireland. And this is some of her story. By design, my husband Ed and I were in Ireland on the last Sunday of July, known in that country as Reek Sunday. It's the day on which the Irish pay their respects to St. Patrick by climbing the mountain that bears his name, Croagh Patrick, 2,510-foot peak in County Mayo overlooking Clew Bay, where legend has it Patrick spent 40 days praying for Ireland's deliverance from the worship of pagan gods. And with that handled, he charmed all the snakes in the land to leap from the summit to their deaths, and the Emerald Isle has been free of snakes ever since. In gratitude for some of his ministrations, some 30,000 people climb Patrick's Mountain every year. It's an ancient pilgrimage site, another one of those thin places where the door is cracked between this world and the next. The climb to the top begins before dawn. People from all over Ireland arrive in the dark, picking their way through the food stands and souvenir shops that have been set up for the event. Many of them carry a pilgrim's staff, which they either brought with them from last year or purchased when they arrived. Quite a few are barefoot, since the proper way to climb Croagh Patrick is with bare feet. Those who've done it before know what they're in for. About halfway up the Croagh, the mud path ends in an expanse of loose, sharp rocks that are guaranteed to draw blood. Begin. When they reach the summit, they'll all stand in the fog before a whitewashed chapel with a plexiglass porch on the front. Inside the porch, elaborately vested clergy will celebrate the Mass all day long. The services will be broadcasted over loudspeakers, and afterwards pilgrims will file through damp corridors below the chapel to receive the sacrament in their own hands. Then, after a breakfast of cold chocolate bars and hot chocolate purchased at the top, they'll make their way back down the mountain again. If they're lucky, the whole journey will take less than 4 hours. Being more of a tourist than a pilgrim, I didn't arrive until midday. I had plenty of company, however. Thousands of us filed up the mountain. Others came down. There were mothers carrying babies and old men with their trousers rolled up to their knees. There were gangs of teens who looked as though they should be robbing cars instead, and matrons in print dresses with flowered scarves tied around their heads. Some people carried icons of St. Patrick in their arms. Others fingered rosaries. Since I wore shoes, I was moving pretty quickly, but every now and then I would get stuck on a narrow stretch behind someone whose feet were bare. Watching those pale, tender souls picking their way through the muck gave me a lump in the throat. When we arrived at the rocks, it got worse. In the first place, we entered the fog that made it difficult to see more than about 10 feet ahead. And in the second place, it was all but impossible to walk upright on the rocks. They shifted underfoot like giant marbles, only sharper. Most people leaned over and became four-legged creatures again, finding their way across the jagged boulders with their fingers and toes. In the process of looking down more than they looked up, some of them lost their way, others lost their balance and fell. Even if you couldn't see them for the fog, you could still hear them. Every now and then, a whistle would blow and a crowd of men in orange slickers would slumber past carrying some wounded pilgrim on a stretcher. Seeing this, the rest of us became more attentive to each other. We reached out to steady each other and swapped advice on which way to go. Some of us even gave our staffs to people who seemed to need them more. After a couple of hours, a bunch of us reached the top and stood there with thousands of other people, all of us with our hair plastered against our heads and our clothes soaked with heavy fog. We had to hunt around for the chapel, which shone out of the fog like a white smudge behind the gray. Standing about 15 feet below it, we watched the priests in their plexiglass box presiding over the Mass in their immaculate white robes. The celebrants might have been reading the minutes of a previous meeting for all the energy in their voices. Our responses weren't much better. Then he snapped the huge white host in half, and we filed through the corridors beneath the chapter to receive our individual serving of the body of Christ. I imagine I wasn't the only person there who experienced this as somewhat of an anticlimax. Looking at the white circle pressed in my hand, and then looking at the bloody feet of the person in front of me, I had no trouble at all deciding what was the real body of Christ. The thin place had done its work. The door between this world and the next had cracked open for a moment, only the light was not all on the other side. Instead, it lit up this side, where a bunch of wet, tired people whose feet hurt were all walking around with faces bright as candles. In the words of this great storyteller, may we find wisdom for our living.
In times of sadness, when life brings fear or pain, seasons of grieving, when loss seems more than pain, in word and deed, may our love surround you. In these our times of need, may love in times of gladness, when life brings happiness, seasons of pleasure, when work has brought success, we celebrate. In our hearts we join you. In these abundant blessings we share the joy. In joy or sorrow, as life brings what it brings, trial or triumph, together we will sing.
a poem by Twyla M. Hansen entitled Fog. The fog comes as a surprise, forms in silence overnight. So when you part the curtain, a white blur muffles the known world. Moving through, no escape, every last green leaf dotted silver. Last night's moisture glistens on grass tips. Until you cross the footbridge and stop. Below is a world most will miss. Vehicles in a rush to somewhere else. 50 yards down the creek, a heron poises in shallow water, perfectly still. Grassy banks lined with tracks of deer. On the far side, a dozen wild turkeys cross a mowed clearing, one by one, to fence line, and then to field, to forage. And overhead, in this ground cloud, Canada geese come in for a landing. You can hear, but not yet see. Because this old planet still has a few tricks in its bag, a monkey wrench or two to make us pay attention, to slow down, as drivers do, the whine of tires on pavement muted. As you turn back, the fog clears. Yet, all day, you will hold this other world close. In the words of this poet, may we find wisdom for our living.
This is the time of year that we often wake to fog where we live at South Cooking Lake. As the nights get a little longer and the air gets a little cooler, we have just those perfect conditions for that cooler air to collide with the warmer air and create fog. We get just the right differential between the air temperature and the dew point that makes condensation inevitable. In our COVID parlance, aerosols have become part of our vocabulary. But unlike the invisible aerosols of a virus. Fog is a visible aerosol of tiny water droplets suspended in the air near the surface of the earth, just like a ground cloud. Some of us are well acquainted with fog. Having grown up in coastal climates or island landscapes where fog is as predictable as hunger, as sure as summer comes eventually, fog comes with it. The coast is regularly shrouded in fog, and 5 kilometers inland, it's a perfect sunny summer day. Fog has this fascinating capacity to creep from seemingly out of nowhere, cover everything in its path with a heavy gray blanket, and then just as mysteriously as it arrives, it takes its leave with similar stealth, evaporating when the air temperature warms above the dew point. The San Francisco Bay Area is famous for fog, especially in summer. I want to show you a little experience of fog on steroids in time lapse taken over 18 months. This is fog rolling in and out at sunrise and sunset in the San Francisco Bay Area near Mount Tamalpais. Somewhere along the way, we've each met fog as a weather event, a thick film that distorts headlights and streetlights, a cloud bank that rolls in and disappears everything in its path like a musician. We've watched the world outside our window disappear and find ourselves staring into what feels like a void of nothingness. But we've also experienced fog in our inner world, an internal weather system, fog that's precipitated by grief or depression, the fog of dementia, or the foggy brain that comes as a side effect of disease or treatment. The fog we experience transitioning from a state of dreaming to a state of waking. Fog is as densely real to us in our innerscape as it is in our shared landscapes. I want to return to a character from the Hebrew Christian tradition, a character that Chris reminded us of on the first Sunday in the month of August, in our gathering when we explored the sacrament of quiet. In a scene before the prophet Elijah experiences that sacrament of quiet, when he didn't find what he was looking for in the spectacular, when his spirit wasn't settled by dramatic events of sensational winds or quaking earth or blazing fire, but he found his window into wonder in a quiet, settled moment. Just before that scene, the ancient storyteller stitches in this tale. Elijah was afraid and fled for his life. After he went a day's journey by himself into the wilderness, he sat down under a solitary broom tree. He wanted his life to be over. He prayed, "I've had enough. Take away my life, I pray, for I'm no better than my ancestors." Then he lay down under the broom tree and fell asleep. Suddenly a messenger touched him and invited him to get up and eat. Elijah saw there was a cake baked on hot stones and a jar of water. He ate and drank and lay down again. The messenger came a second time, touched him, and invited him to get up and eat. Then he went in the strength of that food for 40 days and 40 nights to the sacred mountain, where he came to a cave and spent the night there. The next day, a voice invited him to go out and stand on the mountain. In the quiet of that place, he found what he needed to return to his life. While he was seeking shade from the blistering desert sun, his internal weather system was heavy fog. Outside, it was a blue sky day. Inside, it was overcast and socked in with fog. His horizon had disappeared. The sun that was blazing down on him couldn't begin to lift the fog that was deeply within him, shrouding his spirit. And he was grounded by that fog. Grounded in depression and despair. His world was falling apart. His country was led by a weak and narcissistic king and a corrupt and conniving queen. They ruled with a great sense of entitlement, without any regard really for the needs of their people. They were highly effective in silencing their critics, equally effective in manipulating the law to serve their interests, padding their pockets with ivory, stealing ancient lands, fueling war after war with their neighbors in Syria. They surrounded themselves with advisors who told them just what they wanted to hear. And they humiliated and hunted down those who dared to oppose them. Elijah was one of their chief critics. He had every reason to despair. And really, who wouldn't be depressed in his situation? When fog rolls in and all our familiar landmarks disappear, color drains from our world. Everything collapses into foreground. Our vision is dramatically limited and we're confined inside that ground cloud. it's so easy to become distorted in the fog, disoriented. Several years ago, Don and I climbed a mountain not far from Croagh in Ireland. When we started up the mountain, it was a clear, windy, Emerald Islands kind of day. And before we got to the summit, we found ourselves engulfed in fog. We couldn't see more than a few feet in front of our faces. And the path that had been so distinct and discernible just disappeared into the fog. Indistinguishable, really, from the mountain. We began to get closer to the ground, using our hands along with our feet to keep our way. And finally, we were forced to turn around, to retrace our steps back down the mountain rather than to try to find steps forward in the fog. Shortly after we began to descend, the rains came, and the winds followed. And before long, we were walking in sunlight. By the time we reached the bottom, the fog had scampered off as mysteriously as it had snuck in, and the top of that mountain stood against clear blue sky once again. But fog has a way of slowing us down. It has a way of confining us, moving us in, holding us in the limited space of not seeing, not knowing. It has a way of disorienting us, turning us around, forcing us to reckon with what's left when the visible world around us disappears. Turning to trust what we can smell and hear and touch when we can't see a thing. Finding the sacrament in the particular and unique solitude of fog. Listening for the foghorns that sound in the distance. Sometimes, like it was for the princess, in the voice of friends. Sometimes, as it was for Elijah, in the voice of a stranger. Sometimes, in the wisdom that comes out of nowhere, a word that pulls us through the fog, a song we hear that helps lift the cloud, the taillights of someone who has been this way, who is in this with us, someone whose lights we can follow. In that experience Barbara Brown Taylor describes of climbing through the fog to the sacrament served at the summit, we discover with her the sacrament of the fog itself, the opportunities to help each other navigate across the sharp stones, to help each other discern the path when the path has disappeared, to tend one another's wounds because each of us is bleeding somewhere. The sacrament we crave isn't contained in the cracker, the wafer, the bit of bread. The sacrament we seek is shrouded in the ambiguous and intimate fog within us, sometimes between us, other times around us. The fog of uncertainty, fragility. In the ancient story, the fog within and the unrecognized voices inviting Elijah to just take care of himself, Pay attention to what he needs. Eat and drink and rest. Gradually, those invitations to give himself the care and time he needs opened a window to wonder for him. And his soggy solitude was slowly pierced by a sense of the sacred, some larger knowing, some greater love, some longer story of which he began to know himself a part. Some sense of a gentle mystery that began to fill his ache with awe. The dangers in his life didn't magically disappear. In fact, the forecast didn't improve at all. For the foreseeable future, it was still mainly overcast with scattered fog patches. But Elijah's orientation to his weather changed. He opened to the wisdom we hear in the writings of Ron Atkinson, the quote you saw at the beginning and we'll see again at the end. Ron, who learned a faith in fog, living in an island community, he said, baptized into fog. We die to designations, definitions, that we may dive deeper to where the hidden dwells. Our deepest hungers, the deepest spiritual hungers within each of us is not for the ecstatic or the miraculous or the impossible or the sensational. I believe that our spirits simply long for sadness to be shared, for anger to be heard, for fear to turn toward love, for grief to be held, for ache to give way to awe, for mystery to infuse our hurt with hope. In this foggy time, in this time of continuing uncertainty, in this long-range forecast that tilts toward despair for the world, when depression can seep in like fog and we lose our way, we listen for those sounds that remind us that we are not alone. Those voices that penetrate the fog like a foghorn. Those lighthouses that flash with moments of wisdom. The memory that things are still where they were. The fog has not moved them. It's only obscured our view. And let us find the courage to dive deeper where the hidden dwells. And there, may we find a window to wonder that invites us to journey through our ache to unspeakable awe. take this moment to pray with one another, a way of bringing our attention to our intentions, that we may be awake to the windows into wonder. So we offer these words with one another as a way of settling our spirits to attend to what is within us and around us. We celebrate the moments of clarity in our lives, the aha of insight, the times of sensing the true north of our path, and the sighted moments of vision when we see our direction clearly. We also know what it is to be in the ambiguity of waiting, wondering, wandering in search of firm ground on which to place our next step. May we open to the wisdom of our ancestors, caring community, instinct and intuition, and the teachers all around us. As we navigate the fog, may we grow more patient with ourselves and more kind to one another. May we discover the daily sacraments that anoint the most ordinary of days with grace. May it be so.
I want to share a few invitations to you as the community of SSUC. It's just 2 weeks until we are planning to gather with limited attendance in person back here in our building after so long apart. And because we want to know what to expect and how to plan, we want to invite you to reserve a place. There are still spaces left. Please, if you're planning on attending one of the 3 Sundays in September, the 12th, 19th, or 26th, please do register online at the website that you see on your screen, or by calling or emailing the church office, and we'll make sure to have your space reserved. Some excellent and exciting news that we get to participate with Teresa and Sam in their upcoming wedding this Saturday. They are inviting you to be cyber guests at their wedding that is happening Saturday at 7 p.m. Mountain Time. And they're encouraging you to dress for the occasion if you'd like. I know you're not leaving the house, but they'd love it if you dressed, if you took a picture of yourselves and sent the picture to them so that they could share in your joy and in our collective joy with them. You can join the ceremony that day by logging into our website, by just visiting our website at ssucedmonton.com/live. We'll be live just before 7 p.m. So grateful we are, as always, for all the ways that you're able to support us. If you've never donated to SSUC before, we invite you to help us with our work, not only here in South Edmonton and across the city, but across the country and around the world through the work of the Mission and Service Fund of the United Church of Canada and through all our partners that we work with to bring relief and to bring our work around the world. Please donate to any of the ways that you see on your screen, and know that we are most grateful.
Let the light of love shine through. Let the light of love shine through. May the best of who I am be the source of what I do. light of love shine through. Let the light of love shine through. May the best of who I am, may the source of what I do, let my light of love shine through. Let the light of love shine through.
In the days to come, may the light of light shine through in your spaces, in your lives, in your homes. May the light that we kindle together as community shine through to you when we are apart. May the light that's kindled in your clearer and sunny moments shine through in the darker, foggier times. And in it all, may we be one with each other, working and acting. May we go in love, go in peace, to take this light into our lives and into the world. Wherever you are and wherever you go in the days and weeks to come, may you be well. And until we see you again 7 days from now, take care and be well. Goodbye.